Hello, everyone, and welcome to this virtual town hall with NSF Hydrologic Sciences Program Directors. Quasi is very excited to host this town hall with speakers Laura Lautz, Elizabeth Boyer, and Justin Lawrence, Program Directors of the Hydrologic Sciences section of the National Science Foundation. My name is Julia Masterman. I am the Science Education and Outreach Coordinator for Quasi. Quasi is the consortium of universities for the advancement of hydrologic science, and our mission is to advance water science by strengthening interdisciplinary collaboration, providing critical infrastructure through our data services, and promoting education in water science at all levels. I would encourage you to reach out to me, visit our website, and sign up for our newsletter to learn more about what we do and how we can support your science. I'll be adding links for our newsletter and to join our Slack channel in the chat in just a moment. But before we get started for this virtual town hall, I wanted to take an opportunity to let you know about some upcoming events and deadlines at Quasi. We have 2 cyber seminar series in the works at the moment, in addition to this town hall. Our first cyber seminar of our Critical Conversations series will be held this Friday, April 9th. I'd encourage you to join us for a presentation and discussion on critical zone science. Our second cyber seminar series that is going on right now is the Introduction to Snow Hydrology series that is held on the last Friday of each month. On April 30th, we'll be learning more about remote sensing, specifically passive microwave and radar remote sensing for snow science. The deadline to apply for the Instrumentation Discovery Travel Grant is April 16th. This award will help cover travel expenses for students or scientists at US universities and colleges to visit colleagues with specific instrumentation expertise. I would encourage you to learn more about that grant and apply by April 16th. Also, if you're interested in being an inaugural member of Quasi's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Standing Committee, April 16th is a deadline to indicate your interest. I'll be posting links about all of these different things in the chat in just a moment so that you can learn more. This webinar series and virtual town hall will be recorded and will be posted on the Quasi YouTube channel later this evening. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please utilize the Q&A feature within Zoom or put them in the chat. Our speakers will do their best to get to as many questions as possible. Thank you again for joining us for this virtual town hall with NSF Hydrologic Sciences Program Directors. And with that, I will pass it off to Laura.
Thanks, Julia. Let me just take a second to share my screen. Okay, well, again, thank you, Julia, for hosting us, and thanks to Quasi for organizing this event. I'd like to say hello to everyone out there in the virtual world. We can't quite see you, but we know you're there and we can feel the positive energy of the event this afternoon. So thanks so much for tuning in. For those who don't know me, I'm Laura Lautz. I'm a program director for the Hydrologic Sciences Program at the National Science Foundation. And we're hosting this town hall to tell you a little bit about the Hydrologic Sciences Program, the scope of the research we support, to give you ideas for writing proposals, and really, most importantly, to answer your questions and make sure you have all the information you need to engage with our program at NSF. So I'm joined by my colleagues, Justin Lawrence and Beth Boyer, to the 2 other program officers in the Hydrologic Sciences Program at the National Science Foundation, and they'll be leading other parts of the presentation. So I'm going to leave it until they're taking over the dialogue to do their own introduction. The program is also supported by the contributions of our mission support specialist, Denise McGee, who's also pictured here. If you are ever wondering, what the contact information is or who the current program directors are for hydrologic sciences, since they do change, you can find that information on our program website, and that'll be provided in the chat in the presentation today. So we are your program officers for the Hydrologic Sciences Program. And we are your point of contact. And there are lots of different reasons you might engage with a program officer at NSF. And the most important ones, or maybe the most common ones, I should say, are highlighted here. So you might reach out to one of us wondering if your proposal is a good fit for our program, and hopefully we'll give you some information to figure that out today. You might be preparing a proposal for the National Science Foundation and have some questions about the specific requirements of our program, limitations of our program that would inform your proposal preparation. You could reach out to us with those questions. We can also be a conduit to help you connect with other parts of the National Science Foundation. So if your research isn't a clear fit to our program, we can point you in the right direction for other programs at NSF that might be appropriate for your research. And then also, if you're interested in being a reviewer or a panelist for the Hydrologic Sciences Program at NSF, we'd love to hear about that, and we'd love to engage you with the proposal review process, which we're going to talk quite a bit about today. So the Hydrologic Sciences Program is one of the programs that we call a core disciplinary program in the Division of Earth Sciences. The Division of Earth Sciences is one of 4 divisions within the Geosciences Directorate. As a core program, we essentially provide consistent, sustained support for the hydrologic sciences community, and the HS program has done that for the last just about 25 years. So there are other programs at NSF that are maybe initiatives that emerge and sunset. The core disciplinary programs are generally sustained for a long period of time to support the community that's doing research in the field of study. So the scope of our program essentially covers the terrestrial water cycle. And I say terrestrial to highlight the distinction of hydrologic sciences from the ocean sciences and the atmospheric sciences, which are funded elsewhere at NSF. Although, of course, there's intersections between our field in hydrology and those other programs. So our program funds research about water, both on and beneath the Earth's surface, as well as relationships of water with the living and material components of the environment. So on and beneath the Earth's surface could be surface water or groundwater, and relationships with living components could be relationships with vegetation or microbes, and material components may be things like soils or rocks that make up the geosphere. We support research about how water interacts with the landscape and the ecosystem, as well as how the hydrologic cycle is altered by land use and climate. And that really defines kind of our core program scope. So within that core program scope, we can articulate our foundational topics. And this is essentially the scope of work that the program funds. We support research that improves understanding of terrestrial hydrologic processes, such as rainfall, runoff, evapotranspiration, infiltration, flow paths, stream flow generation, the fluxes and storage of water between these different components of what we all think of as really the water cycle, the terrestrial water cycle. Many of the projects that we support involve hydrologic transport. So they involve how water transports suspended materials, materials that are dissolved in water, and colloidal components. And also how the terrestrial hydrologic cycle is coupled to other cycles, like biological cycles, geochemical cycles, and how it's coupled to food and energy systems. Projects supported by the Hydrologic Sciences Program use observational approaches, experimental work, theoretical approaches, and modeling. So within that broad scope, which I've just defined, there are always topical areas that seem to have kind of current interest within the program. And these are motivated by things like community reports, maybe emerging research gaps or technology, new technology that makes it possible to answer research questions that we couldn't answer before. And so we highlight a few areas of current interest to the program right now, but don't think of this as a fully exhaustive list. Think of this as more of a list to provide, inspiration as we think about the Hydrologic Sciences Program. So we see a lot of research focused on translation of results across spatial scales, from the pore scale to the global scale. So for example, there's a lot of emerging data derived from remote sensing. And we can use this information to understand hydrologic processes at very large scales that perhaps weren't accessible before the advent of these remote sensing technologies. We see interest in incorporating microscale processes. So for example, we fund pore scale research on fluid flow in porous media. How do we incorporate those pore scale processes into macro scale simulations? So for example, trying to simulate something at the aquifer scale. Of course, research is also becoming increasingly interdisciplinary, and there are some interdisciplinary areas that receive specific attention from our program. So as I mentioned earlier, we're interested in human impacts on the hydrologic cycles. So what are impacts of what are the impacts of humans on the landscape through urbanization, agriculture, and global change? Of course, we see an emerging interest in global climate change, both from the scientific community and increasingly from the political landscape. And so the coupling between land and atmospheric processes and how these impact extreme events are an important topic in our field of study. We also have research on environmental justice, the coupling of hydrologic systems, biological systems, sociological systems, and water at the food energy nexus. There's a lot of emerging interest in data science across the National Science Foundation, and this is also true for hydrologic sciences. So topics like data fusion, how do we integrate these new large data sets, both with high spatial and temporal resolution of things like water quality or water fluxes into hydrologic models? That's an emerging area of research. Machine learning, how do we take large data sets and use them to identify patterns that could generate hypotheses about underlying processes that we could learn about through analysis of these large data sets. Data mining, how can we extract information from image processing? So we've seen a real increase in the application of drones and unmanned aerial systems in hydrology, and also the use of signal processing. So resolving signal from noise in applications like time series analysis. And then also just the continuum of modeling, from physically based models to those that are more purely data driven, and how they can be coupled. So I mentioned that these topics of current interest in the scope of our program are meant to be inspirational more than limiting. As a community-based organization and program, we are committed to supporting the most meritorious research in any area that's relevant to our program, including both interdisciplinary work and multidisciplinary research, and especially those topics that are in emerging fields that are responsive to the needs of the hydrologic sciences community. So essentially, we're looking to you for your great ideas so that we can support your research and advance our field of study. So the Hydrologic Sciences Program funds a few different types of awards. So I want to talk a little bit about that. We fund the most common award type is a regular research proposal or a standard research proposal. And these are proposals that where PIs are proposing to acquire new data, perhaps through modeling, through synthesis, through field observations. So acquisition of new data, synthesis of existing data to address hypothesis-driven research. These can be single institution proposals, or they can be collaborative proposals. So a single institution proposal, you might be a single PI submitting your research proposal from your institution, or you can work with a colleague in another institution to submit a collaborative proposal. In that case, your two institutions can submit proposals at the same time in a coordinated way, where you have one project description that describes what you will do collaboratively between your institutions. It's evaluated as one proposal, and the institutional awards are made separately. These are typically 2 to 4 years in duration, and anywhere from $250,000 to $700,000. That's a general range. It's not a limiting range. We don't have an explicit cap or minimum on our budgets, but that's kind of typical for what our program can support. We make anywhere from 25 to 35 awards per year of this type. In addition to standard research proposals, we support research proposals that follow the career trajectory. So many of you may have heard of the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Program. The Hydrologic Sciences Program does not, by itself at a program level, review and award graduate research fellowships, but the Graduate Research Fellowship Program does award fellowships in the field of hydrologic sciences. And if you are interested in engaging with that program, members of the hydrologic sciences community can serve as reviewers and panelists for the GRFP program, which is a great way to learn about that program and perhaps how to mentor your own students in submitting successful proposals to that program. Within the Division of Earth Sciences, we have a postdoctoral fellowship program. The postdoctoral fellowship program is for all of earth sciences, including the hydrologic sciences. Awardees receive a 2-year award. Each year, the postdoctoral fellows receive a $62,000 stipend. They're also allocated up to $25,000 for research-related activities. And there are typically 1 to 3 proposals of this type, postdoctoral fellowship proposals, awarded in the hydrologic sciences every year. So we go from the graduate level to the postdoctorate level. Then for early career PIs, so these are people at the assistant professor level, so an untenured faculty member and a tenure track appointment. These are proposals specifically focused on the integration of research and education by early career investigators. They're 5 years in duration. They're $500,000 or more. And the Hydrologic Sciences Program does evaluate these at a program level, and we award approximately 5 career awards every year. New this year, there's just a brand new solicitation that's come out within the last year called the Mid-Career Advancement Awards. This is for faculty at the associate professor level, mid-career faculty. The solicitation is for proposals that are 2 years in duration, about $400,000. There's very specific budget requirements, which you could read about in the solicitation. These are intended to support sabbatical-like experiences that will advance research for mid-career faculty. So this is new. We have just received proposals for the first time this year, and we anticipate making 1 or 2 awards of this type each year. There are also some special categories of proposal for which you must inquire with a program officer first and essentially be invited to submit a proposal. So you share your idea with a program officer, we give you feedback on your idea and tell you whether you should move forward with submitting a formal proposal or not. There's 3 categories I want to mention here. The Hydrologic Sciences Program supports rapid proposals. These are awards to collect perishable data. So as the name implies, they're rapidly made. So if there were an unforeseen event like a hurricane or a wildfire, even this year, the impacts of COVID, these events are unanticipated, may have provided a unique opportunity to collect perishable data. So we will receive requests for these. They're for $50,000 or less, and they're explicitly for the cost of associated with collecting that data. HS Funds Rcn Proposals. These are Research Coordination Network proposals. Their intention is to foster new collaborations and interdisciplinary topics. So like bring new networks of collaborators together who have not worked together before, and to address topics that are typically interdisciplinary, so across more than just the hydrologic sciences. They can be up to 5 years and $500,000. You need to inquire first if you're interested in this type of proposal. We also support workshops and conference travel with the goal of supporting diverse attendance and mentorship activities at events with themes that have topical themes central to our program. They're typically $100,000 or less, and often much less than $100,000. And you can inquire with us if you're interested in this proposal type. So the information that I just presented about the program scope, the contact information for program officers, the award sizes, the durations, the types, all the program specific requirements for our program can be found in our solicitation. And so I encourage you, if you're thinking about submitting a proposal to hydrologic sciences, to read the solicitation. And one important part of the solicitation is that the Hydrologic Sciences Program does not have deadlines. You can submit proposals at any time. When you submit a proposal, and this is true across the National Science Foundation and also in the Hydrologic Sciences Program, this is essentially the path towards an award. So when you submit a proposal, the first thing we do is check that your proposal is compliant with the requirements of our solicitation and of the policies and procedures of the NSF. Once we've confirmed that you're compliant, we will send your proposal out for ad hoc reviews. So we send your proposal to domain experts in your field to get their feedback on the merits of your proposed research. And we solicit a minimum of 3 ad hoc reviews and often more for each proposal, standard proposals, career proposals, mid-career advancement proposals submitted to HS. Twice a year, approximately, we convene a panel. And so we'll bring a panel of experts together that will review a group of proposals, 40 to 50 proposals at the same time, look at their own assessment of the merit, the ad hoc reviews, and rank them and rate them based on their merit. Then we as program officers do our own analysis and make either award recommendation or a recommendation to decline the proposal. If an award is recommended, it goes to our division director for approval, and finally to the Division of Grants and Administration. And then if all groups concur, then you as the PI would receive your award letter once grants and the Division of Grants and Administration has concurred with all the recommendations. And our goal is to get through this process within 6 months for every proposal. So if you're writing a proposal to the NSF, you should think about several questions, and we highlight some here to really get you thinking about the content of what's needed for the content of a proposal to be competitive in our program. So if you're preparing a proposal for HS, once you know that it's a fit to the program scope, you know what type of proposal you're submitting, you should think about what new knowledge or theory is needed to answer the scientific question that you're posing in the proposal. So you've identified an interesting question. What is the new knowledge that needs to be generated? And how does your proposal address that? How will you acquire or develop that new knowledge in order to answer the question that you've posed? Do you have specific testable hypotheses to bridge a gap in knowledge? And this is a really important component. If you can articulate very clear testable hypotheses, this can be very compelling for an ad hoc reviewer, proposal reviewer, for a program officer to see the gap in knowledge and how, if you completed the work that you've proposed, you would fill that gap in knowledge and succeed in testing that stated hypothesis. A hypothesis will also motivate what type of data you need to test your hypothesis. So we really want to see that connection between data acquisition and the research questions to be addressed. There's also some logistical questions like, is it reasonable to get the data that you've proposed within the time frame and budget of your project? Is it realistic? And if it's not, you might want to bite off a smaller part of the problem or refine your hypotheses to create a proposal that has kind of the scope and duration that our core program can support. A powerful proposal has 3 core components that you can think of as the 3 legs of a 3-legged stool, all required in order to make the whole thing come together. A proposal needs to have a strong underlying theoretical framework. So this is really the introductory material and testable hypotheses. You need to clearly show how the data, either the data you plan to acquire or the data you plan to synthesize, will be used to test your stated hypotheses and fill a knowledge gap. And to propose acquisition or synthesis of data for generation of new knowledge. So if you have all 3 of these components, you're well on the way to crafting a competitive and powerful proposal for our program. Finally, these are some questions you may want to think about as you prepare a proposal for any NSF program, including hydrologic sciences. One, why should people be excited about the work that you've proposed? What is the societal relevance of your proposed work? If you're excited about your work, if you can get the reviewers to be excited about your work, and we're excited about your work, then you're well on the way again to being rated as a competitive proposal. Have you demonstrated what work has been done in the field that you're studying? how what you propose has built on that prior knowledge and why your proposed work is important. You know, what has been done? How does that leave some important gaps? And how is the work that you're proposing going to fill that gap and build on that prior work? Does the work fit within your expertise and career plans? Do you have the background knowledge to successfully execute your proposed research? Or maybe you can think about whether you've brought together the right collaborative team with the complementary expertise to achieve success. Do you have a project management strategy that includes benchmarks, timelines, and metrics? So you might include a timeline that shows what tasks you'll accomplish in each year, what kind of deliverables may be achieved in each year, and how you will know if you have achieved success. Has everyone on the team committed to follow through on what they agreed to do? So you may have letters of collaboration, which we'll touch on later. And is it the right team that's been brought together? Do you have the right resources to accomplish all aspects of your project, including the broader impacts, which we'll discuss in just a moment? And is your project realistic? Can you achieve what you've stated you hope to achieve in the time and with the budget that you've requested? And what will success look like? You know, what would, if your project were successful, how would we know? What would be the evidence of success of your project? And with that, I will pass it over to Beth for the next section of the presentation.
Thank you, Laura, and hello, everyone. My name is Beth Boyer. I'm a fairly new rotator at NSF in the Hydrologic Sciences Program. So I'll pick up here where Laura left off. In addition to the Hydrologic Sciences Program solicitation that Laura mentioned, there's another essential document that's displayed here. It's the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide, otherwise known as the PAPG. This document provides specific guidance for the preparation and submission of proposals to NSF. And the instructions in the PAPG apply unless otherwise stated in the solicitation, which take priority. The elements of a standard NSF proposal are shown here in this slide and are described in great detail in the PAPG guide. Some of the elements of the proposals are a project summary, which is very important, that describes an overall vision of your work, a project description, which is the major technical part of the proposal that has a limit in our program of 15 pages, references that have no page limit, bio sketches, which have a strict standard NSF-wide format, a budget and budget justification, which can be, the budget justification can be up to 5 pages. That's how important it is. Current and pending support, which is another standard ingredient of all proposals, facilities, equipment, and other resources, a postdoctoral mentoring plan, a data management plan, and letters of collaboration. We'll talk about some of these elements of the proposal in subsequent slides. Importantly, the PAPG document also describes the process and the criteria by which all proposals at NSF will be reviewed, and also outlines why a proposal might be returned without review. All proposals submitted to the National Science Foundation are reviewed according to the 2 merit review criteria shown here. One is intellectual merit, and the other is broader impacts. The intellectual merit criteria encompasses the potential to advance knowledge and understanding and tends to be the more technical side of proposals. The broader impacts criteria encompasses the potential to benefit society and contribute to the achievement of specific desired societal outcomes. It's important to know that both criteria are to be given full consideration during the review and decision-making process. And each criterion is necessary, but neither by itself would be sufficient. Next slide. When evaluating NSF proposals, reviewers, both the ad hoc reviewers and panelists, will be asked to consider the 5 elements shown here. These 5 review elements are applied to both the intellectual merit part of the proposal and the broader impacts part of the proposal criteria. And so the 5 review questions that the reviewers are asked to comment on in regard to both the intellectual merit and broader impacts pieces include: what is the potential for the proposed activity to advance knowledge and understanding for the intellectual merit part, or to benefit society for the broader impacts part? And then applied to each criteria, to what extent do the proposed activities suggest and explore creative, original, or potentially transformative concepts? People are looking for things that are new and novel. Is the plan for carrying out the proposed activities well-reasoned, well-organized, and based on a sound rationale? Does it incorporate a mechanism to assess success? And 4th, how well qualified is the individual, team, or institution to conduct the proposed activities? And lastly, are there adequate resources available to the PI, either at their home institution or through collaborations, to carry out the proposed activities? Next slide. The intellectual merit that we see in the NSF-supported hydrological sciences research is substantial, and it manifests itself as increasing rigor, new data and methods, and new ways to understand questions of great importance. But we often get questions about the broader impact side of things, and we wanted to spend a little time here talking about some ways to think about ways of developing broader impacts in your projects. Research can create broader impacts by generating new scientific opportunities or creating communicative projects. Some of the ideas shown here are to promote teaching, training, and learning, like, for example, reaching out at all levels of graduate education, undergraduate education, research opportunities for undergrads, curriculum development for K-12 schools, mentoring, and so forth. Broadening participation of underrepresented groups and increasing diversity, reaching out to HBCUs, engaging underrepresented communities, working with community colleges, working with veterans are some of the ideas that we're seeing. Building or enhancing partnerships with other federal agencies, industry, or international collaborations. Enhancing infrastructure for research and education, such as developing new software, data, equipment, or labs. Broadly disseminating information to enhance scientific understanding and engagement, like reaching out to communities with citizen or community science, informal education at museums, developing virtual reality ways of learning about environmental problems and hydrologic problems, and so on. And also benefit society by articulating the environmental impacts to land managers, policymakers, stakeholders, and so on. It's important to note that we don't expect any one set of broader impacts to look the same from proposal to proposal. Each proposal has a very different way of addressing broader impacts. It's better to do 1 or 2 well than to try covering everything shown here. Not every PI or institution is well suited for the same broader impacts. But broader impacts should be integrated and meaningful and not just tacked on to the proposal as an afterthought. Next slide. We at NSF know that science costs money, and we wanted to give you some ideas here on budgetary guidelines and cost sharing. The information that Laura provided earlier about the typical grant size that are the norm for the program is helpful toward giving you an idea of what the program can support. You can use the budget justification pages to explain your costs. And again, that's so important that it's now 5 pages can be used to describe that. And we ask you to ask for the money to do the things that you need to do. So eligible costs can include things like personnel costs, of course, for the PI and some of their salary, postdoc, graduate students, undergraduate support, equipment, materials, supplies, travel, other things like subawards, computing fees, tuition fees, participant costs that might mean direct costs for stipends or subsistence allowances, travel allowances and registration fees that are paid on behalf of participants who are not students. Like, for example, a stipend paid to a K-12 teacher who participates in evaluating curriculum developed, or a key stakeholder who participates in a conference. We ask that the budgets be realistic and reasonable, and that's one of the things that the reviewers are looking at. Next slide. Postdoctoral mentoring plans are required if you have postdocs included in the proposal. Proposals with funding for postdocs must include this mentoring plan as an extra document uploaded with the proposal. For collaborative proposals, the lead organization must submit the mentoring plan. Next slide. To give you some ideas for the content of a postdoctoral mentoring plan, it might include providing career counseling, training in grant writing, and training in professional ethics. It should include plans for collaboration on publications and presentations, offering professional development to improve teaching and mentoring skills, and could provide coaching on how to effectively collaborate with researchers from diverse backgrounds and disciplinary areas. Next slide. The data management plan is also very important. The Division of Earth Sciences has a policy on data management, making data publicly available within 2 years of collection. The Hydrologic Sciences Program has a policy that data should be lodged within established data centers, such as Quasi's HydroShare and their data services, EarthChem, DataOne, GitHub, and ArcGIS Hub, and other repositories that might meet the principles of findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data. Some common weaknesses that we see in data management plans might be someone who proposed to make data available upon request from the principal investigator or on the principal investigator's website or the project website only. Data be made available at the time of publication rather than within 2 years of collection. Data stored somewhere on a private system like on a Dropbox or Google Drive. So we're looking for repositories that provide easy access and fair access to data. Next slide. The goal of a data management plan is to provide the public with access to research results and data. In the review criteria, the reviewers are asked, does the data management plan identify key data sets and research projects to be generated? Are key elements described for each data set? Is the selection of repositories and the timeline for data release compliant with the policy? And is the data management plan supported by the overall proposal? For example, in the budget, in the management plan, and evidence of previous data sharing in the results of prior NSF support. Next. And lastly, letters of collaboration. Note that this isn't a letter of support or a letter of recommendation. Letters of collaboration, if they're needed, should include only the following statement. If the proposal submitted by Dr. PI entitled title is selected for funding, it's my intent to collaborate or commit resources as detailed in the project description or the facilities, equipment, or other resources section of the proposal. It essentially says that these partners will plan to do what you said they would do in the proposal. Your proposal wouldn't be sent out for review if the letter of collaboration doesn't comply with this exact prose. Special types of letters that might deviate from this prose might be for special solicitations that require a different kind of letter. For example, career awards and mid-career advancement grants require a letter from a department head or similar. And the details of those are in those program-specific solicitations. Thanks. Next slide. And
Hi, I'm
Justin.
Oh, thank you, Beth. I'm Justin Lawrence. In addition to being a program director in the Hydrologic Sciences Program, I also work in the Geomorphology and Land Use Dynamics Program and in the Critical Zone Collaborative Network Program. I've been at NSF for about 7 years now. So here are a few examples of NSF-supported facilities that are relevant to the hydrologic sciences community. Of course, you all have some familiarity with Quasi, as they are the host of this webinar today. Quasi stands for the Consortium of Universities for the Advancement of Hydrologic Science. They provide infrastructure to access and disseminate data. They host other webinars, such as this one, on a variety of topics, as well as host meetings and workshops to provide education and training. Another facility is CTEMPS, which stands for Center for Transformative Environmental Monitoring Programs. They enable broad use of systems for fiber optic temperature measurement, wireless multi-parameter sensors, and unmanned aircraft. The third facility mentioned here is NCALM, which stands for National Center for Airborne Laser Mapping. They enable research-grade LiDAR surveys through the competitive NSF grants process, and they also offer seed grants for graduate student projects. Next slide. The merit review process at NSF is a long one. The agency goes to great lengths to conduct a fair, competitive, and transparent merit review process for the selection of projects that it will fund. In the Hydrologic Sciences Program, proposals are typically reviewed using a combination of ad hoc reviews, which are independent written reviews solicited by email, and panels, which are meetings where all of the proposals are discussed and ranked relative to each other. Panels are typically held twice per year, once in the fall and once in the spring. We aim to reach a final decision on most proposals within 6 months of submission. However, for some proposals that land in the gray zone just below the level of available funding, we might hold on to them for longer than 6 months in case additional funds become available later in the year. Next slide. Given the interdisciplinary nature of the hydrologic sciences, we co-review proposals with many other programs across the National Science Foundation. We think sharing proposals with other programs is healthy, and we encourage it. Some of our common co-review partners include other programs in the Geosciences Directorate, such as geobiology and low-temperature geochemistry, Arctic natural sciences, geomorphology and land use dynamics, physical and dynamic meteorology, programs in the Engineering Directorate, such as environmental sustainability, environmental engineering, and fluid dynamics, programs in the Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences Directorate, such as human environment and geographical sciences, and programs that cross-cut the whole foundation, such as the Cyber Infrastructure for Sustained Scientific Innovation Program. Next slide. You might want to look into some of these cross-cutting programs that are designed to support larger projects than the Hydrologic Sciences Program is able to handle. Within the Earth Sciences Division, there is the Critical Zone Collaborative Network Program, which focuses on the portion of the Earth's surface from the top of the vegetation canopy to the base of weathered bedrock. There's also the Frontier Research and Earth Sciences Program, which stretches from the core to the critical zone. Other programs across the NSF that are of potential interest to hydrologists include Dynamics of Integrated Socio-Environmental Systems, or DISIS, for Human Natural Systems Integration, the Sustainable Regional Systems, or SRS, for Connected and Urban and Rural Systems, and the Coastlines and People program. Next slide. Some other cross-cutting programs to explore are Cyber Infrastructure for Sustained Scientific Innovation and Geoinformatics, if you have interest in developing cyber infrastructure. Also, please consider the REU GeoPaths and IRIS programs for education and training of diverse students, and the HBCU EIR, IUs-HIS, EPSCoR, and RUI programs for building institutional capacity for outreach and education. Next slide. We recognize that COVID-19 has had major impacts on the hydrologic sciences community that will be felt for many years to come. For those with active awards, please be sure to document the impacts of COVID on your project in your annual reports. We encourage you to use the no-cost extension option to give you more time to complete the work. Awardees have a lot of flexibility to rebudget across categories. For example, funds that were originally budgeted for in-person conference travel might be reallocated to student support. We are open to considering supplemental funding requests to support students, postdocs, and technicians. Also, we'd like you to be aware of this Career Life Balance Initiative, which can provide supplemental funding to support additional personnel to sustain research when PIs, postdocs, or graduate students have increased dependent care responsibilities. Next slide. Here are some ways to get more involved in the NSF Hydrologic Sciences community. Subscribe to NSF's email listservs. Look on the website for the NSF Division of Earth Sciences for more information. Get in the habit of reading Dear Colleagues letters that are posted on NSF websites. These DCLs are intended to emphasize current NSF opportunities and priorities. A great way to learn about the type of science that the Hydrologic Sciences Program supports is to serve as a reviewer or a panelist. We are always looking to bring new reviewers into the program, and we are especially looking for early career people who recently completed their PhDs. If you're interested in serving as a reviewer, please fill out our online survey. We're available to meet with you on Zoom, either individually or with your team, if you have any questions at any time. Please just shoot us an email and we'll find a time that works. Next slide. So at this point, we'll open it up for any comments and questions. We'd really like to make these town halls from the Hydrologic Sciences Program as useful as possible. If you have any ideas for what you'd like to see in future town halls from us, please type them in the chat. Those would help us with our future planning. Thank you.
So thank you, Justin. Thank you, Beth. I am going to stop screen sharing for now to make it a little easier to see folks. And we are going to transition to answering questions that have been posted in the Q&A and in the chat. So let me just stop sharing. And hopefully you've all seen throughout the presentation, we have been trying to put links and information in the chat. So you can learn more about some of these programs. So make sure you scroll through the chat to see additional information that you can find online about the programs that we've described. So, and a bunch of the questions I know we've been trying to type in the answers to. So forgive me, I'm kind of collecting my thoughts. I've been reading the Q&A, entering information in the chat. So let me just take a moment to look at the Q&A window. And of course, Justin or Beth, if you see a question that you'd like to volunteer to answer, certainly chime in to do so. And I think I'll start at the top. So one question from an anonymous attendee: can a postdoc submit proposals for the Career Award Program? Is there a nationality criteria for PIs for submitting postdoctoral or career award proposals? To be eligible for the career grant program, you do need to be in a tenure track appointment at an institution, and you do need to get a letter of support from your department chair confirming your eligibility for the career program. So the career program actually has really great online resources. If you're interested in writing a career grant, I strongly suggest going to the career solicitation. They do webinars, they have frequently asked question guides that answer these type of questions. But yes, it is limited to those that are in tenure track appointments who have not received tenure. You're also limited to 3 submissions. So you can only submit a proposal to the career program on 3 separate occasions. The next question, and I'll read the question, but if Justin or Beth wants to try to answer this one. The next question is, I'm excited to see that the HS program funds environmental justice research. I've been discouraged by other program officers from using the term environmental justice in proposals, even as a theoretical lens to empirically test hypotheses. Can you share how the HS program considers or does not consider environmental justice as a theory, method, broader impact, etc.? So would Justin or Beth like to comment on this one?
I can just go ahead, Justin. Well, I was just going to say that we do welcome proposals on the topic. Absolutely. Don't feel limited.
I agree.
Of course, I agree. And, we intentionally put some of these topics in the PowerPoint to inspire questions like this. So I'm glad you asked this question. I would say within the scope of the HS program, if there's theoretical research on environmental justice, I suspect we would probably reach out for co-review among programs in the social sciences if there's a strong social science component, primarily because those are the programs that have the research communities with the expertise to really evaluate the cutting edge nature of the research in that topical area. But if something's at the interface of a social science program that might cover topics related to environmental justice and also has a strong hydrologic sciences component, we would welcome working with you to figure out how to co-review that proposal, or how it fits into the NSF program. I think it could also fit as a potential broader impact as well. So if the environmental justice themes are more in that, like how a translation of your research into societal impact, then it could be framed as a broader impact component as well. So I think I feel when answering some of these questions, I inherently want to say, well, you write up a one-page summary and email us and we'll talk about it, because there are so many iterations. So those are general guidelines. If you have specific ideas and you're wondering how they fit or where they fit, it is not uncommon for a PI to email one of us with like a one-pager or a paragraph and kind of say, this is what I'm thinking, like where would I go or how would this work?
I can take this next one.
Okay.
It says, I agree with Claudio and an anonymous attendee who expressed that it's often confusing to figure out what topics are appropriate for this program and when they are not purely hydrology enough. I have also had issues with this in the past. As Laura mentioned, the program is increasingly interdisciplinary in that that's the way the field has evolved to look at the linkages among many things. I think that it's possibly a bit outdated to think that a proposal only has to be hydrology to be supported by the program, though of course hydrologic science is at the root of it. And so, like Laura said, it's pretty common procedure for people to send in a one-pager or to set up a Zoom to discuss an idea with program officers today. And we're all welcome. We all welcome you to do that with us. And I know for a fact, just helping man the email chain since I've started my new position here, that Laura and Justin are very good about getting things out to other programs as needed. Like, for example, if co-review would be needed or help your proposal to be evaluated by two different programs, that's one way forward. Another way forward is that we can give you advice on which program where it would be appropriate if hydrological sciences is not. But we do welcome things at the interface of hydrologic sciences with other fields, and that's increasingly common in the proposals that we're getting and funding. Feel free to add, colleagues.
I think that was perfect, Beth. I like what you said about, if hydrologic sciences is not the home, we can help you find the right home, right? We're not in the business of gatekeeping. Actually, we're in the business of trying to help you find what program, the program in which your proposal is likely to be the most competitive, because that's where you want it reviewed. I can take the next one, which is about the resubmission process, right? I've submitted to HS and the proposal was declined. I know there's not a resubmission process, but is there a timeline in resubmitting a rejected or declined proposal? So any proposal submitted to NSF is treated as a new submission. That's an important thing to keep in mind. So that's different from some other agencies where there's actually kind of a resubmission process. And as far as the timeline goes, the policy is that you cannot resubmit the proposal until a year has passed since the original date of submission. So if you submitted a proposal on January 1st of 2020, you could resubmit a revised version of that proposal on January 1st of 2021, based on the feedback of the reviewers. So the timeline is really, you just have to wait a certain period of time before you can submit a revised version. And as far as I know, in our program, there's no limit on the number of times you can resubmit a proposal, because it's not really a resubmission, it's a new submission every time. So the next question, I'll read aloud if Justin or Beth wants to answer, or I can chime in anyway. Approximately how many proposals for the standard research grant does the NSF HS program evaluate in a given year? I guess it's not really fair of me to ask my colleagues to answer this question, because we're not really supposed to we can't, we don't publish, the program level numbers of submissions each year. That information is reported certainly at a directorate level and maybe even at a division level, but not at a program level. And it does change a lot year to year. So the number of proposals we received this year may be quite different than what's received next year. Justin, do you know if there's any kind of proposal award rate at like a division level that we could report that you know of?
I think the only publicly available information is at the directorate level, and definitely not at the program level.
Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. Next question. Do you recommend getting NSF funding on a regular project before pursuing the career award? Would anyone like to answer this one?
I mean, I would say that the career award is not necessarily for everyone. If you feel like you have a great idea with some of your colleagues that may be better suited as a collaborative research proposal, that might be better for you to go after that at that stage. It just kind of depends on what your needs are, where you're at, and what ideas you have.
I like that. You're right. I hadn't thought about it that way. The career proposal program is not for everyone. And I have heard just anecdotally that some programs have a culture of maybe awarding career grants, of encouraging PIs to pursue a career grant before regular proposals, but we don't have any kind of expectation of that in HS. So there are two different proposal types, and you don't need to do one before the other. Do we need to submit letters of collaboration from co-PIs or senior personnel, or are letters of collaboration just required from groups/organizations that we will be working with but not funding? That's a great question. You do not need a letter of collaboration from a co-PI or someone who's listed as senior personnel. So essentially, if someone is in the budget, if they're listed as on the cover page, a co-PI or senior personnel, then you don't need a letter of collaboration. Letters of collaboration are to confirm someone is going to collaborate on a proposal in the way described in the proposal, who's not actually listed as a formal member of the project team as a co-PI or senior personnel. I would also say it's best to provide letters of collaboration for the to affirm collaboration described in the proposal. There's not an inherent, it's not always that more letters are equally a better proposal. So we only need the letters that articulate the degree of collaboration that you've described in the project description. Next question. Do you fund proposals that aim at improving methods for HS?
I would just say the majority of proposals we received are hypothesis-driven research, but we do on rare occasions support methods proposals if it's clear that they could lead to a transformative advance in hydrologic sciences.
For some of these, there's a lot of questions about like one topic or another that we might support or not. I guess I would say I encourage you to reach out to us with a one-pager or some sort of overview, and we can help guide one-on-one. Just because we're running out of time to get through all the questions here. I think we only have a few minutes left.
I think we are scheduled to go until 5. Is that right,
Oh,
Julia?
great.
And we don't have to go the full time, but we have a little bit of time. But I agree with you. Some of these questions are a little bit maybe individual specific. Like I think the next question relates to the last one about methods developments, about software development. And I think Justin had really good guidance that I'll just echo for the software development question. We're primarily funding hypothesis-driven research, kind of basic research in the hydrologic sciences. But if developing a new method or developing a new piece of software could open up entirely new lines of research in the hydrologic sciences that would transform our field, then we would certainly be interested in a proposal of that type. But I think that's really the way to think about it. Is how is it going to be transformative for the field? I should also say when it comes to software development, Justin mentioned the geoinformatics program, the cyber infrastructure for sustained scientific innovation program. There are a number of programs at NSF that are explicitly for developing capacity in cyber infrastructure. And so if the novelty is in the software development side, for example, rather than the domain specific HS side or at the intersection of the two, those programs could definitely be an outlet. And we could, give you advice on who to contact, given your project idea.
Can I jump in really quick? We had a couple of questions come in via the chat as well. I would encourage people to keep using the Q&A, but just so that these don't get lost. We have this one. Thank you so much for holding this webinar. 2 things I would be thrilled to see in a webinar are best practices in writing annual reports and guidance for potential reviewers, how to review proposals well. Do you have any resources to suggest in that vein?
Yes. I don't have the link handy. I can try to look for it in a moment. But when we send out ad hoc reviewer requests, you do get a very long letter. All right, we'll acknowledge there's a lot of content in the reviewer invitation letter. But one of the lines in there is a link to a video on how to review an NSF proposal, which is something available, like any of you could go and watch it right now. We just send this link with the reviewer invitation request, and it's pretty good. I would say if you're looking for guidance on how to review an NSF proposal, that's a great place to start. So we'll try to find that link for you.
Okay, one more from the chat. How does HS review proposals that have a place-based, community-driven approach? As a native Hawaiian PhD student, it has been very important to me to serve my local community.
Does anybody want to answer it? Do you want me to answer it?
You can take it.
Well, there's certainly a role for place-based research. It's I don't know if I'm directly answering this individual's question, but there's strengths to both researching very broad topics that could be applied in any setting in the hydrologic sciences, and topics that are unique to people or place that are really unique for particular reasons. So like even in I'm just thinking a very, some of the science questions that we see in HS all the time. Maybe there's a focus on peatlands or something because of their importance to carbon cycling, and some of the processes that might come out of a research proposal might be applicable to that particular area, but that particular area is extremely important in like the global hydrologic cycle or the global carbon cycle. And so as a result, kind of place-based research becomes particularly important. Community-based research is also important. And I guess the question is really how the proposed research will advance the field of hydrologic sciences. So if something is more applied in nature and is more focused on the community outcomes, it may be that it's harder to find a home at NSF, but I guess it's so hard to answer that question without more specifics. So I kind of am falling back to what we said earlier, which is if you have an idea like that and you're really unsure, you read the solicitation, you think, I know this is relevant for the program, but I'm just not sure if it's the right fit. I really encourage you to contact a program officer, because we can tell you, oh, well, maybe if you framed it in this way, or it might not be competitive in HS, but there's a whole program that's really focused on that at NSF where this would be a perfect home. So I want to be encouraging that you should reach out with those ideas, whether or not they ultimately become a proposal to our program, or if we suggest pursuing a different program at NSF.
Okay, maybe we can return to the Q&A for a little bit and jump back and forth.
Okay. So this next question, how are ad hoc reviewers made aware of the interdisciplinarity of hydrologic sciences so they aren't out of sync with current ideas in the program? That's a good question. I think it's, you know, we as program officers, you know, have articulate the scope of the program, and we have our solicitation that articulates that scope. We are also, it's a very dynamic process, receiving proposals, inviting ad hoc reviewers, and convening panels and making program decisions. And so we do outreach events like this one to try to communicate to the community the scope of our program and the nature of the research that we're funding. We are also selecting ad hoc reviewers, so trying to find ad hoc reviewers that we think have the right domain expertise for the particular proposal. And if it is interdisciplinary, we're going to seek out reviewers that we think will understand and be able to evaluate the interdisciplinary nature of the proposal. We also, in convening panels, are looking for panelists that can think broadly. We invite co-review with other programs so we can see, well, how does the hydrologic sciences community value this proposal, and how does ecosystem sciences evaluate this proposal, and how can we like reconcile the recommendations of those two programs. And then finally, there's also the program officer level evaluation. So, you know, we are, you know, we always have more strong proposals than we have money to support them. And so we have to do a lot of clear thinking about program balance. And so if we're trying to fund a combination of maybe more a variety of proposals across different disciplinary domains, you know, we may prioritize different topics that are interdisciplinary, disciplinary in nature. But I guess the bottom line is we seek ad hoc reviewers that we anticipate could properly evaluate the proposal, whether it's disciplinary or interdisciplinary, and ad hoc reviewers are one step in the overall proposal review process. They're all, you know, proposals are also evaluated by panel and to create an appropriate program balance. So evaluated by us as a program officer team.
I'll just add too, you can kind of think of the solicitation as our contract with the community. And in the program description section of the solicitation, it explicitly says that the Hydrologic Sciences Program is committed to supporting the most meritorious research in any relevant area, including interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary research. So all of the ad hoc review requests that we send include a link to this solicitation, and we also refer the panelists to the solicitation.
And lastly, I could just add that if a proposal is sent out for review, then it means that we've already deemed it fitting within the program, and we let reviewers know that. And we're seeking reviewers who can, you know, review your work. So we'd seek the right reviewers, we hope.
I'm skimming through the questions. There are a couple that I see that I feel are a little bit fall into that relatively specific category. So I'm gonna scroll down a little bit and we'll come back to them if we have time. One question is about panels. Has the HS review panel already met for this spring, and approximately when would the fall panel meet? And we actually don't advertise, we don't make public the dates of our panels. So I can't directly answer that question. Although we already discussed, we do typically have 2 proposals a year. So yeah, we have typically have a spring panel and a fall panel, but we can't divulge the dates. There's a question about international research. This might be a good one to touch on if either of you want to answer it, or I could. Could you comment on international research? What would justify a project overseas?
I would say if there's a particular research site that is uniquely suited to address whatever hypothesis you pose, that could be a strong justification for international research. And also from the broader impacts standpoint, promoting international collaboration is a type of activity, broader impacts activity that's highly valued by the NSF.
There are also some programs that encourage international research with certain places and just generally that could potentially be co-reviewed or be related to our program. So international research is not out. It's encouraged in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And on a logistical level, you know, NSF doesn't typically directly fund foreign participants, like a foreign organization, but you can have collaboration or you know, international travel, international collaborations. We're asked to, it should be that anything funded through your NSF proposal, like if you have a sub-award to a collaborator, international collaborator, you have to justify that that's required. And essentially that the international collaborator provides a unique expertise, facility, something about their geography that couldn't be provided by a US collaborator. And so you just have to provide justification, but they're not, you wouldn't write like a collaborative award with a international organization, right? Funding goes to US based organizations. Are all proposals in HS subject to ad hoc and panel reviews? Other programs do only panels. Anybody want to take this?
Well, I will say that in my short experience in the Earth Sciences Division, it's policy or standard protocol of the division to have both ad hoc reviews and panel reviews. There are occasional exceptions for things that for some reason can't come to a panel, but that's the only reason they wouldn't be brought to a panel. So the typical is we have both for every proposal in the division of Earth Sciences.
Another question is, do you also support research in undergraduate institutions, RUIs through HS? And the short answer to that is absolutely yes. We are happy to receive proposals, RUI proposals from primarily undergraduate institutions. Again, I'm just skimming through a little bit for broad questions. I'm wondering if we can submit our proposal to HS and other programs at the same time. And yes, you can. When you submit a proposal, you have to indicate a lead program. So you have to identify one program which essentially receives the proposal, but you can also indicate additional programs on the cover page. And therefore, when you do that, you're essentially requesting co-review by those other programs. I think it's generally a good idea to contact program officers before indicating multiple programs on a proposal. It's not required, but I think it's good to, you know, if you inquire first and then the program officers can tell you, oh yeah, that's a good proposal candidate for co-review. And then you can indicate that by indicating both programs on the cover page.
Here, we have one more question from the chat. Will research project duration impact proposal approval? My project will be completed in 1 year.
There's not a inherent value associated with like the project duration. Really, the question is just whether the project duration is consistent with the scope of work. So some proposals, I mentioned that proposals are typically 2 to 4 years in duration, just to give you kind of a cultural norm, I guess. But the duration is just a function of the scope of work and what's required for the scope of work. Any other questions from the chat, Julia?
One more. It was mentioned that proposals can be submitted at any time. However, the NSF funding opportunities sometimes have clear due dates. If you could clarify some of those due dates.
Yeah, we don't have a deadline for the Hydrologic Sciences program. You can submit anytime except for some specific proposal types like the career award. If you're submitting a career proposal, they do have a deadline that you would need to abide by. But it is true that some programs at NSF do have hard deadlines, but we do not in the Hydrologic Sciences.
It's a good idea to, this is why it's always good to read the solicitation. So our solicitation, the HS solicitation, as just mentioned, doesn't have a deadline. You can submit at any time. But of course, yeah, the career proposal, you're actually not submitting a proposal to the HS solicitation. You're submitting it to the career proposal solicitation, and that solicitation does have a deadline. And it's important to know the difference between, there's programs that have no due date. There are programs that have target dates. So the idea is that proposals, they want you to submit a proposal by a certain time, but it's not a hard deadline. Deadlines, if you don't submit a proposal by the deadline, then it won't be reviewed. It'll be returned without review, or you just won't be able to submit it. So it's really good to be aware of those deadlines. Like the MCA proposal solicitation has a target date. So I was thinking that's similar to the career grant or the career solicitation. It has a date, but it's not a firm deadline, it's a target date.
There's a
That's
question.
the last of the general questions in the chat. Are there any more in the Q&A?
I was going to say there's one here that says, you indicated that you'll have the panels twice a year, fall and spring. Does it mean that if we submit in another month, will it need to wait until fall for review? We get proposals coming in all the time. And if for some reason there are so many proposals that those 2 reviews wouldn't cut it, like for a year, we might add a third panel. It's not uncommon. It's just that, say, recently there's been, say, a fall and a spring. And so that's not necessarily fixed. We'll have the panels to support what we're getting. And then also, immediately after your proposal comes in, it goes through the stages of being vetted for compliance, and then sent out for review for the ad hoc reviews, which always take time to get. We usually like to get 6 reviews. 2 are required, plus the panel review, which means that every proposal gets at least 3 reviews that you get back to you in terms of review feedback, often more. And so we often have 4 to 6 ad hoc reviews, for example. So the review stage starts immediately after compliance is established.
Thanks, Beth. It's a really common question. Good one to ask. So I'm glad folks asked. I see, I'm just skimming through. I saw one in here about does the HS program does HS interact with the NRT program on proposals? And I wanted to answer that because that's a good general question. And the NRT program is a completely independent program. And I know they try to achieve program balance in the NRT program in terms of the disciplines that are supported, but the HS program doesn't inherently participate at a program level in the evaluation of those proposals. In theory, the NRT program could request co-funding or something, or some kind of input on review from programs that might be interested in the topic. But generally, the NRT program reviews within that program, and the HS program doesn't inherently participate in that review process or the award decision-making process in any way.
It might be worth mentioning that a number of these programs that aren't necessarily, that aren't the same program and that are being evaluated independently, if they get a proposal that has hydrologic sciences at the root of it, and it's not their field, it's pretty typical that we'd get an email asking to help suggest reviewers, so that they get at least some reviewers who have hydrologic expertise weighing in. And that's one other way that we would commonly interact, even though we're not involved in the decision-making.
What you said, Beth, makes me actually think back to the question about interdisciplinary proposals and how to find ad hoc reviewers. If you're submitting a proposal to the Hydrologic Sciences Program, it's not a bad idea to suggest reviewers. I think it's good to suggest a reasonable number of reviewers, because we're probably going to also seek reviewers that you have not suggested. So you don't want to suggest every person in the entire community with domain expertise in your field, because then we're going to have to look outside that list. But it's also a great way to point us in the right direction of like who you think, what kind individuals with what kind of expertise do you think would be, the right kind of people to evaluate your proposed work. That's helpful. And so you should certainly suggest reviewers if you're so inclined.
I see one question. What's the best way to engage a current postdoc in a proposal led by a regular faculty? Should the postdoc be a senior personnel? I think whenever you have a postdoc in a proposal, it should be clear that the roles and responsibilities of the postdoc are commensurate with the level of expertise of someone at the postdoc level. It's typically in the budget, there's a budget line specifically under other personnel for postdoctoral scholars, and that's where we usually see it. However, it depends on the rules of your institution. Some institutions do allow postdocs to be PIs on proposals, so we see that occasionally. And in all proposals, including postdocs, you should provide a postdoctoral mentoring plan as part of your proposal.
Thanks, Justin. I see another question. Do you select panelists through the same reviewer survey, or is there a separate survey? So we put a link in the chat, and I think it was in response to one of the questions in the Q&A. We have a survey instrument, a form, let's call it a form, that we have put out there because we're interested in hearing from you. If you're interested in serving as a reviewer, you can also indicate interest in serving as a panelist. You can also indicate interest in serving as a rotator. We haven't talked about rotators. Beth is a rotator. We have scientists who come and work at NSF for 1 to 3 years in duration as program officers in different programs all across the foundation. And so that's also an opportunity to engage with NSF. So yes, if you're interested in serving as a panelist, you can use the same reviewer survey. And I also want to say, for those of you who have filled out that form, thank you. We're really excited to see the interest from potential reviewers. But I also would say be patient, because we are aligning proposals with reviewers with the right domain expertise. So it might not be that you're immediately invited to review a proposal, but that's not because we have a lack of interest. We always need reviews, and we will continue to use that list to find new reviewers to engage with the program. So there's one. So we have 7 minutes left. There is a question: what is the outlook for the upcoming fiscal year? Do you expect to see the budget allocation doubling? And I'm getting a big smile on my face thinking that would be terrific. We don't have any information about changes in our program level budget for this fiscal year or the coming fiscal year. So we don't really have the information to answer that question. All we can do is be excited by any increased investment in HS for any reason in the future. This question, I see the same question at Q&A in the chat, so I'll ask this one. I wonder if we can answer it. Would you say the majority of proposals integrate field data collection and modeling? It seems like it may be challenging to do so given budget time constraints sometimes. What is your perspective on proposals heavy on field data collection and interpretation? Yeah, go ahead, Beth.
I could take a stab at it. I don't have the experience in the program that Laura and Justin do, but in my experience looking at the proposals, there are lots of different types of proposals, not just field, not just modeling, not just the couplings. There's just the whole gamish. All of it, if it's an excellent proposal, right, deemed competitive, has the potential to be funded by the program, and we fund things in all of those spaces. It is common to support field-heavy projects in the hydrologic sciences. It's just that it's not limited to that. So many of the proposals do integrate field data collection and modeling. Some don't, but that would be a fine area to submit a proposal in.
I do see a question that's come in. I don't know the answer to this question, but there's a question about the BRIGHT program. I actually don't know about the BRIGHT program. So if Justin or Beth knows about that program, otherwise we'll we'd encourage you to follow up with an email about that. We could try to dig into it.
I don't know what
I don't know. No.
There's a question about international collaboration and whether the Pyre program will be renewed. I would say the most often question about whether a program will be renewed or will have another solicitation. If it's not our program, it's hard for us to answer that question. And I'm familiar with the Pyre program. I don't know if there's a intention to offer another solicitation in the future. There's a question about what is the balance between data, previous experience presented versus the innovative part. Even some fundamental questions are not reviewed positively because of extension of the previous work. On the other side, if you propose a new idea, you don't have the experience. So how do we balance you have so much experience that people have a hard time understanding how the proposed work is not just kind of an incremental extension of your existing work. You don't want that criticism, or it's so new that there's a question about whether you have the relevant expertise. And I would say this is a tough question. And it's something that really is, I would encourage is in the proposal writing process to try to address, like to clearly articulate in the proposal why, if it's an extension of prior work, what makes it innovative and unique. If you think that the reviewers may be confused about your prior work and what's in the proposal, really clearly articulating in no uncertain terms how the work being proposed is different from that prior work, like taking that question head on instead of worrying if one might ask it. And the same thing if you don't have experience in a particular domain. Some ideas could be identifying a collaborator who does have more experience in that domain. That could be a co-PI, or even write a letter of collaboration to provide some specific support of maybe your training and use of a particular model or a particular field technique or something that might be new for you. So this could be something that's addressed through, collaboration, for example. We're coming right up on 5 o'clock, so I think we'll probably need to stop or have one more question. So I don't know, Julia, if there's one more question from the chat, or if Beth or Justin would like to take one more question that they see.
Well, there is
you guys.
Well,
Go
there's
ahead,
a question here about, for proposals focusing on high latitude water carbon interactions, do you recommend the HS program or the Arctic program, meaning polar programs? I will say that my first idea is that water carbon interactions is something that we see in both arenas. This might be an area where you could submit a one-pager or set up a call with program officers, and we could help you decide which program is best based on the solicitations, and or whether co-review would be merited. But both programs could support such work.
Yep.
Absolutely. Thank you, Beth. Well, we've come, it's about 5 o'clock. And so being sensitive about time, I think we will close the Q&A for now. If you did not get your question answered, I would encourage you to follow up with us. Especially the questions that might be specific to your interests or a particular proposal that you're working on. So certainly don't be afraid to do that. Also, before you sign off, if you're thinking about signing off, I know people have already, but if you have any suggestions for future content for a town hall, some of that has come into the chat, which has been awesome. And so if you'd like to add something as a final thought before you go on how we could improve these for the future, that would be really welcome. And I just want to thank everybody out there in the virtual world for joining us. I hope this was informative. Thanks, Justin, Beth, for co-hosting the event. And thanks, Julia and Quasi, for organizing this for us. And yeah, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Great
everyone.
to see you all.
Bye.